Okay, so there's our iris. Let's just do another quick check, a fit check, to make sure everything here still fits the way it's supposed to, because the whole idea of shaving that off was to make room for what's going on in there. So I put that in, and it's just resting nice and flat against that stuff inside. So I think what we could do is, when it comes time to actually seal this up, then what we can do is probably glue this face to the back of there, and that should be fine. I don't think this is going to work well without the foam ball in it. I think just this sphere, even once we get it together, I think it's going to be too squishy, too delicate. When it comes time to actually attach the nodes and get them firmly glued on there, you got to put some pressure on there, and I'm afraid that it would just crush the ball. So I don't think a good idea. Let's find out. Let's see if this will go on. I know I'm leaving the foam ball out on purpose this time. But I'm just seeing, okay, so that is actually going together without any of the teeth. You can kind of see that it's not as squishy. Not nearly as squishy as it was. And what squish there is clearly because it's not glued. You can see it pushing that seam apart. So it is definitely strong. It would definitely be stronger, but still, I still think there would be a real danger of having it get crushed if you applied enough pressure, and that would just be, that'd be a shame. Put all that work into it and then just have it collapse. So I really think the foam ball is necessary. So do whatever you can to try and find one of these at the right size. So there's nothing else to do here. If you're lighting the model, you have less glue area to work with, but still plenty, I think. You just put your glue here. And for your lighting, I think I'll do a separate video on how I did the lighting for the prototype, and so you can decide how you want to do your lighting. If you like my idea, you can do that. If you don't, you can do your own thing. But when it comes to this part, you just put a little bit of glue there. You'd still mount it on that flat face, and as long as it should be lined up well enough to shine the light right through the eye, so right through the iris. Okay, so I think this is ready to be sealed up. I'm a little hesitant because there's no going back, but everything's done. The iris looks good. It's all put together. There's nothing else we need to do here. If you were going to do lighting, I would recommend you go ahead and get that set up first. Get your lighting installed here. That way you want to make sure it's not pushed too far forward so that it doesn't interfere with stuff there. And make sure there's enough space for the light, whatever light you're using, whatever battery source you're using. Go ahead and get that set up inside the foam ball first, and then I think you could go ahead and install this over that. And then the last thing you'll want to do is get your wires hooked up to the contacts on the switch, because you'll have to bring the wires out. So once you do that, then this really is no longer detachable. I mean, it's, you can pull it out so you can change the batteries, but there's going to be wires holding it on. So I'll show you what I mean. Right, so there's the wires with enough slack that I can actually pull the battery pack out to replace those batteries. And anyway, so obviously that's attached, right? So just keep that in mind. You've got to run your wires through before you do all that stuff. then make sure you've got enough extra length to be able to pull that out and change your batteries. Anyway, I'll go over all that lighting stuff in another video, but I just wanted to make that important note that you probably want to get your lighting set up here first before you close the ball up. So I'm going to use this one. Now, as far as glue goes, I honestly don't remember what kind of glue I used on the prototype. It might have been hot glue because I had that steel cable wrapping around the ball. But that's not what we want to do here. Hot glue does tend to melt this polystyrene foam anyway. So yeah, that is definitely not what we want to do up there. I think I might have to do some experimentation because I don't know what's going to be best. Either the craft glue, or we might have to do some CA glue, or something else. Got like some E6000, some really strong stuff. Might just have to see what actually bonds to the polystyrene foam. See if anything reacts with it. Like this stuff might actually like melt, or the CA glue might melt this stuff, or just react in a weird way. So I'll do some experimentation and tell you what I find out. Alright, so I've done some experiments to try and figure out which glue would be best for gluing the foam ball into the paper sphere. And so I've got this is the craft glue, and then there's our CA glue, and there's the E6000. And we'll just kind of see if we can peel these off, see how strong they are, see if they're like reacted in some negative ways with the foam, polystyrene foam. So this is the craft glue. See how that did. I mean, it's bonded, but it's not honestly that strong. It's just peeling off pretty well, pretty easily, I mean. It did bond, but wasn't very strong. So let's check out the CA glue. It's definitely stronger, and it didn't do anything weird like melt the foam or anything. So, like, you know, if it was to react with the foam and like melt it or something, I would expect there to be, you know, like cavities or collapsed areas where the glue had contacted it. But no, it just bonded nicely. Stronger than the craft glue. Here's the E6000. That's definitely the strongest bond right there. In fact, it's not even, the glue just tore off the paper rather than the foam ball, so it definitely bonded stronger to the foam ball. And okay, so that's our strongest one so far. Might have reacted a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but it almost looks like there's a depression right there where that glue is at. That could be a coincidence. Maybe there was already just some kind of pushed in spot. Or maybe when I was attaching it on, I just pushed it in enough to indent it. Although I don't think so. But no, that is a good bond. Just taking a look at it up close. Yeah, it might have reacted a little bit with the foam, but not to such a degree that it would be a problem. It's actually a really good bond right there. So, I mean, the CA glue would work. The E6000 is obviously the strongest. The craft glue would work in a pinch if that's what you got. Like I said, it did bond, but it was pretty easy to peel that off of there. So, just depending on what you've got, any of those three would work. Craft glue, of course, because it's got high water content. If I were to just slather it on there, then there's potential for warpage. So I do want to think about that. The CA glue does have the off-gassing that might, I don't know if it would come around there and cloud up the window. If I did a whole bunch of it, it might. I don't know if this does anything like that. I've honestly never noticed. Never noticed if it does anything like the clouding and off-gassing issue. But I think I might just use the E6000 because that was a really good bond. I don't ever have to worry about it coming off of there. And yeah, I think that's what I'll use. So at this point, it's time to glue the body together. I did decide that I'm not going to light this, even though I kind of briefly considered it. I will need to, in order to get this to close up, I will need to take that back section off the rear panel because there's no hole for it to fit inside. And I do want to keep that switch. I don't want to have it just be sealed up in here for no reason at all. So I will go ahead and cover the back, that little open hole in the back, with some black paper, I think. I was briefly considering there for a moment. I hesitated because I thought, well, maybe I'll just like put a black marker or black paint on the back of that, but no, I think I'll just go ahead and cover that slot with a piece of black paper. And this, earlier in the video I mentioned that this part right here, yours won't have these glue tabs on it. That was a mistake when I was putting together the parts, that I added glue tabs there, but there really doesn't need to be any. So yours won't have those. I was thinking I might need to cut those off, but honestly I'm just going to be gluing the rear panel over that, so there's no reason to do that. So yeah, let's go ahead and just glue that on there. We'll take this E6000 and use that. It does tend to get a film over it really quickly, so you do have to work quickly. I'm just getting that little bit off there. I think what I want to do is probably add glue here, because I don't necessarily want to add glue onto that middle blue part, just in case it does do anything weird. I don't want to be able to see it from the front. So, and I've got enough bond surface around there, just the white part, that's what I'll do. I'll just add a little bit on there, quickly spread it around with the tool, and then put the ball in. So like I said, I do got to work quickly, especially when I thin it out. By spreading it like this, it forms that film really quickly. So let's just go ahead and get that in there. And it just rests nice and flat against that. Just a little bit of pressure. Obviously, you don't want to crush anything that we've got going on in the eye up front. So I'll just set that aside. We'll let it do its thing for a while we work on removing this back part of the rear panel. That's probably good enough. I think it might be easier to glue this on after we'll glue the two body halves together because it's just kind of squishing the sphere shape around when I try to put it on there. So once the two body halves are together, they'll reinforce each other, as well as having the foam ball inside will keep it from doing too much weird stuff. So I think it'll be easier to get that on there. Okay, so hopefully that's enough time for that E6000 to bond. I mean, it probably isn't completely cured yet, but I think it's workable at this point, as long as I don't put too much stress to pull that apart. All right, and this is probably the trickiest part of this whole build, is just getting these two halves together and bonded, and making sure all those little glue tabs are actually inside. I think I could maybe glue those two tabs there, and that might give me enough that I could at least, kind of remove some degrees of freedom. But I'm not going to be able to do my usual strategy of then gluing across and gluing at the quarters marks and then finishing up in between, because I think once those, well, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if I'll have enough play to actually, well, maybe I can. So I'm going to go ahead and actually try, see if I can glue those two. I know I can at least get away with that, because even though they're not like in a line with each other, they should still be able to hinge out well enough that I can get access to the back. And we'll try the quarters. Okay, so I was able to do the two opposite sides, and I think I've still got enough access here. Get some glue under there. I won't be able to do the quarter points, because once I do, those will be closed up so tightly that there's no getting in to get glue under there. So I'll just have to do the two halves and then run the glue, close up that half, run the glue, close up this half, and then that'll be it. It might get a little bit messy up in here because I'm going to have to try and get the glue up under there without popping these tabs out. I want to keep them so that when I close it up, they're underneath. But at this point, I'm more interested in having a good strong bond here, than in having a clean seam, because I'm not going to be seen. But the strength's more important than the visual here. I just decided I think it'll be easier to try and get the glue underneath this, so that I can just quickly and evenly apply a layer of glue under there, rather than trying to get the glue on each of those individual tabs. Wow, that turned out great. Much better than I expected. Definitely see got some glue on the outside of the seams, but really not too bad. And again, doesn't really matter. But that is a good fit. All right, next bit is to get the rear panel on. And really all we have to do is just get that on there and try and center it, just using these circles as reference, just so it's equally spaced between all four of them pretty much. And then I'm again just lining up that seam along the bottom there. I don't know if you notice, if you can see it very well on camera, but there's a difference between the paper on the rear panel versus the body sphere. And it's not really a difference of paper. I use the same paper for both, but the body sphere, I actually printed the sheet with those parts on my home printer, and it's not as good of a print. I don't know if you can, it'll focus on that. If you can see, it's a little bit grainy, and it's got a matte finish to it, which is actually not bad. It doesn't look bad. Where this has got a more glossy finish to it, but the print quality is much better on this. I took this to a copy center, and that's usually what I do for my paper models. Is I'll take the PDF on a USB stick to a copy center and have them. I also bring my own cardstock because I found cardstock that I like, and so I'll hand them the cardstock and the PDF and say, print me 2 copies of all the part sheets onto my cardstock, and the print quality is a lot better. It does have that glossy finish, but I mean, honestly, I don't really. If it is a problem on the Ghost model, it's not going to be a problem at all. But if there is some model that I'm building that the gloss finish doesn't look good, then once it's finished, I can spray it with a coat of a matte clear coat, and that takes care of that. But anyway, so yeah, that's why there's a difference between here and there. I started this on a day where the copy center was closed, and I didn't want to wait, so I just printed that on my home printer, and that's good enough for making this video. Just wanted to show you how it was made. So slight difference in color as well. This is, I don't know, more of a bluish gray. There's more of a bluish tint on the copy center version. Okay, let's go ahead and glue that on there. I wanted to give that a little bit of time to that center seam time to bond before I started pushing on it too much. Okay, so again, we're just lining up that bottom seam there, and then judging how close it is to the circles, all 4 of those. I just have to be careful, because if I put too much pressure on this, then it just kind of collapses that side in, pushes it out on the other side, or on the opposite sides. So it is a little tricky to get this on here. You almost don't even want to put any pressure on it. Just kind of let it sit there and let it take its natural spherical shape that it wants to. So there we go. There's our completed ball. Eye, sphere, body, whatever you want to call it.